Hello friends. So this is my first attempt to present something online for you. Tried my best, but I'm sure any faults remaining there, my students would pardon me for that. Today we are going to see the topic of intrauterine fetal death. And as you know, any pregnant woman would be very happy because, especially at term, because she knows that something new is going to be added to their family, and that's a tremendous joy for the couple. But unfortunately, if such scenario arises where the doctor declares that unfortunately it's an intrauterine fetal death, when the demise has occurred in utero, then there is a terrible psychological trauma to the mother, and so also the obstetrician treating her. And once the patient delivers, this is the outcome. You can see the macerated baby here with a very horrible look. So let's define what this intrauterine fetal death is. All fetal deaths weighing more than 500 grams during pregnancy or labor, or that can also be defined as death of fetus in utero after 28 weeks of gestation. So you can take down this definition as death of the fetus in utero after 20 weeks of gestation. That will include, of course, whether this death occurs during pregnancy or occurs during labor, that is intrapartum fetal death. Let's see what are the different etiologies for this intrauterine fetal death. The factors can be divided into maternal causes, fetal causes, and placental causes. Let's see what the maternal causes are. As you can see on this slide, whenever the patient is having hypertensive disease of pregnancy, then maybe severe preeclampsia or eclampsia, then naturally there is very high incidence of intrauterine fetal death. Or if the mother has developed diabetes during pregnancy, which we call as gestational diabetes, or maybe pre-existent diabetes, and if it remains uncontrolled, please mark my words and underline them, uncontrolled diabetes. Don't take down anything. I'll give you enough opportunity to take down the notes with every slide. So coming back to the causes, the maternal causes is maternal hypertension, especially of severe variety like severe preeclampsia or eclampsia. Diabetes, well-controlled diabetes does not lead to intrauterine fetal death. So we label that as uncontrolled diabetes, whether that is gestational diabetes or a pre-existing diabetes. And then infections, any kind of maternal infection that can lead to, of course, the fetal infection in turn and lead to intrauterine fetal death. Or hyperpyrexia, whenever the mother develops hyperpyrexia because of any reason, especially because of infection, that leads to intrauterine fetal death. And thrombophilias of pregnancy. What happens in thrombophilias of pregnancy is that the placental bed, which supplies the fetus, the vessels in the placental bed undergo thrombosis, and the blood supply to the placenta is cut off. Ultimately, the blood supply to the fetus is cut off, and there is an intrauterine fetal death. And the last maternal cause that includes is placental separation. And this placenta could be in the lower segment, which we call as placenta previa, or in the upper segment when it separates, we call that as abruptio placentae or accidental hemorrhage. These are the maternal causes. So now you can take down the maternal causes for intrauterine fetal death. I'll go slowly. One is hypertension. In this you write hypertension, especially of severe variety or severe degree, and that is preeclampsia or eclampsia. Then comes diabetes. In diabetes, you please mark the words uncontrolled diabetes. Why does this happen? In uncontrolled diabetes, the fetal hyperglycemia increases, fetal pancreas starts releasing insulin, but when there is severe fetal hyperglycemia, then the pancreas cannot cope up with that glucose load, and then that leads to anaerobic metabolism of the glucose, leading to lactic acidosis, leading to intrauterine fetal death. Severe anemia, of course. Then, as I discussed, thrombophilias. Then antepartum hemorrhage, whether it is placenta previa or abruptio placentae. In both these conditions, the exchange of nutrients and gases gets hampered because the placenta has separated, and severe the degree of placental separation, that will lead to the intrauterine fetal death. Maternal infections like syphilis or infections leading to hyperpyrexia leads to intrauterine fetal death. And post-maturity is a condition beyond 42 weeks of gestation where the placenta slowly stops functioning, and that can lead to intrauterine fetal death. I quickly revise the maternal causes: hypertension, diabetes, uncontrolled severe anemia, thrombophilias of pregnancy, antepartum hemorrhage, maternal infections, and post-maturity. Let's have a look at the fetal causes of intrauterine fetal death. As you can see in this figure, any chromosomal abnormality exists in the fetus, then there is very high chance that it leads to intrauterine fetal death. Then certain infections can lead to non-immune hydrops of the fetalis, and that can lead to intrauterine death. Septicemia in the fetal life can lead to intrauterine fetal death. And then, as you can see in this figure, the baby is quite yellowish in color, which is because of Rh incompatibility. So Rh isoimmunization. Then twin transfusion syndrome, where one fetus receives a lot of blood supply at the cost of the other one, and the other one undergoes demise. And intrauterine growth restriction is also known cause of intrauterine fetal death. So to revise, now you can take down the fetal causes of intrauterine fetal death. One is chromosomal abnormality in the fetus. Second is fetal infections like rubella, parvovirus B19, and cytomegalovirus, CMV. Then hemolysis in the fetus, which occurs because of Rh incompatibility. Then twin transfusion syndrome, and IUGR, that is intrauterine growth restriction. So quickly we revise the fetal causes: chromosomal abnormality, fetal infections, hemolysis in the intrauterine life, twin transfusion syndrome, and intrauterine growth restriction. Then comes the placental causes. What are the placental causes? As I mentioned earlier, same thing here. Low-lying placenta which gets separated, which is placenta previa, or a normally located placenta undergoes separation, which we call as accidental hemorrhage or abruptio placentae. That is one cause. The other placental causes include abnormalities of the placenta, like filamentous insertion of the cord or succensurate lobe. And sometimes we have the fetal vessels which pass through the membranes and then they get inserted into the placenta, as you can see in this figure here. These fetal vessels here is that condition is called as vasa previa. So whenever the patient goes into labor, the membranes rupture, these vessels open up, patients presents to us as antepartum hemorrhage, but that blood is not maternal blood, that is entirely the fetal blood, and a very small amount of fetal blood loss can lead to immediate intrauterine fetal death. Then, as you can see in this figure, there could be tight loop of cord. There is a knot in the cord which gets tightened as the labor progresses, and that can stop the blood supply through the umbilical cord, leading to intrauterine fetal death. And then we also have cases where this tight loop of cord around the neck that can also lead to intrauterine fetal death. So to revise, now you can take down the placental causes of intrauterine fetal death is placental separation one, as occurs in placenta previa or abruptio placentae. Then succensurate lobe. Then vasa previa, where patients presents as antepartum hemorrhage, but it is the blood vessel which runs along the membranes, the four waters, and once the four waters rupture, when the membranes rupture, the fetal vessels rupture and lead to fetal loss. Then true knot in the cord. We have many patients with true knot in the cord, but the Wharton jelly prevents tightness of the cord and prevents the intrauterine fetal death. But when this true knot is tight knot, which especially occurs once the patient goes in labor because there is traction on the cord, then that can lead to intrauterine fetal death. And last is tight loop of cord around the neck or around the body. So I revise quickly the placental causes: the placental separation, succensurate lobe, vasa previa, true knot in the cord, and tight loop of cord around the neck or body. What are the iatrogenic causes? Iatrogenic causes, we are responsible for the intrauterine fetal death. One important cause is external cephalic version in breech presentation. Whenever the baby presents as breech, some obstetricians may try to make that presentation into cephalic presentation by rotating the baby in the maternal abdomen. But then during this process, this procedure is called as external cephalic version, conversion of breech presentation to cephalic presentation. During this, there can be cord accidents or placental separation, and that can lead to intrauterine death. So not practiced in modern obstetrics. Now here you can see a loop of cord which is coming down. This is cord prolapse. This can be iatrogenic because whenever we want to augment the labor, the augmentation of the labor can be done by, you all know, artificial rupture of the membranes. You rupture the membranes, allow the four waters to drain, the presenting part gets fixed to the cervix and well applied to the cervix, and the uterine contractions improve. But if the head is high up floating and there is a large bag of waters, and we try to make the rupture of the membranes, which we call as amniotomy, sudden gush of fluid can push the umbilical cord down, lead to cord prolapse. This cord gets compressed between the fetal head and the pelvis, and that leads to intrauterine death. Then this is obstructed labor, a large size baby, when the labor is being allowed, presuming that the patient would deliver now, and if a prolonged trial of labor is given, that can lead to obstructed labor, that leads to fetal distress and intrauterine fetal death. And if this obstructed labor is added upon by oxytocin that leads to rupture of the uterus, and once the uterus ruptures, the baby is thrown into the abdominal cavity of the mother, the uterus shrinks, the placenta separates, blood supply to the baby is cut off, and the baby dies in utero. So to revise the iatrogenic causes of intrauterine fetal death, one is external cephalic version, which is done for breech presentation. Next is rupture of membranes when the head is high up. That leads to cord prolapse. Then prolonged obstructed labor. So prolonged fetal distress and intrauterine death, and ruptured uterus. So these are the various causes of intrauterine fetal death. Now, how do we diagnose that? The patient tells that everything was okay till yesterday, and patient comes to you with some symptoms, and you examine the patient and do certain investigations, and you come to the diagnosis that it's an intrauterine fetal death. Patient would first come with loss of fetal movements. That is the only complaint the patient may have. And when you try to examine the patient, you will find that the fundal height, which was supposed to increase as per the gestational age, has not increased. There are different causes of no increase in the fundal height. One of them is oligohydramnios. Second is intrauterine growth restriction. And third, most important, is intrauterine fetal death. So first cause is, clinical finding is no increase in the fundal height. Next comes that when you are trying to hear the fetal heart sounds by Doppler, there is absence of the fetal heart. You can see 0, 0 on this graph, on this fetal monitor. And then when you try to feel the head, okay, because the head is now collapsing, the intracranial structures, they are liquefied, you get an egg crackling feel when you are trying to feel the head. So these are the clinical signs. So symptom, we can write down symptoms, loss of fetal movement. And signs, no increase or reducing fundal height, which of course happens because of oligohydramnios, which is a consequence of intrauterine fetal death. Next sign, that there is decreased uterine tone. The uterus feels very flabby. Then on Doppler, you cannot hear the fetal hearts, absent fetal heart sound. And the last one is eggshell crackling feel. But of course, this is a late sign. More than 7 days should have passed after intrauterine death, when the intracranial contents would liquefy and the skull bones would give you this eggshell crackling feel. I quickly revise the diagnosis. Clinically symptoms, patient will come with loss of fetal movements, and the signs are reduced or no increase in the fundal height, which is because of oligohydramnios, decreased uterine tone, absent fetal heart sound, and eggshell crackling feel, which is a late sign. We of course want to confirm our diagnosis, and the gold standard is ultrasonography. What do we see on ultrasound? On ultrasound, there is silent heart. No heart activity is seen on ultrasound. Next, as you can see here, it's the fetus and the uterine wall. There is no amniotic fluid around the fetus. So oligohydramnios, severe oligohydramnios will be there, and absence of fetal heart sounds. Absence of fetal heart. And in this figure, you can see low down that the skull bones are overlapping each other. This is called a Spalding sign, when the skull bones will be overlapping each other. This can be seen on ultrasound. The same thing can be seen on X-ray also. So I repeat, ultrasound will show the absence of the fetal heart, oligohydramnios, and overlapping of the bones. You can take down investigations, ultrasound, absent fetal heart and movement. Please remember that this must be, patient must be examined at least for 10 minutes to make sure that the fetal heart is absent and the fetal movements are absent. Because sometimes transiently for a few seconds, the fetal heart may stop and regain its rate later on. So just very hurriedly, if you see this fetal heart, you may mistake the live fetus for an intrauterine fetal death. And that's why it's a rule in ultrasound that patient must be examined for 10 minutes to confirm the absence of fetal heart and movements. Sorry. On ultrasound, next thing we see is oligohydramnios. That is reduced amount of liquor. And you all know, when do we call this oligohydramnios? Is when the single deep pocket is less than 2 centimeters, we label that as oligohydramnios. And yes, we have collapsed fetal bones. The skull bones will be seen overlapping each other. These are the ultrasound features. I repeat, absent fetal heart or movements for 10 minutes, oligohydramnios, and collapsed fetal bones. What do we find on X-ray? On X-ray, we find that the ribs are collapsed and the spine shows hyperflexion or hyperextension. As you can see here, there is hyperflexion of the spine. That is sign of intrauterine fetal death. And this is not showing Spalding sign, but after 7 days of IUFD, you can see the overlapping of the bones on X-ray also. So what do we see on X-ray abdomen? Spalding sign. You can take down due to liquefaction of brain matter and softening of the ligamentous structures supporting vault. I repeat, due to liquefaction of brain matter and softening of the ligamentous structures supporting vault, what happens is this leads to overlapping of cranial bones. And this appears 7 days after the intrauterine fetal death has occurred. This is called as Spalding sign. On X-ray, you also see hyperflexion of spine and hyperextension of neck. That is because the ligaments have lost their support. Then there is crowding of ribs. And on X-ray, we can see gas shadow in the heart and great vessels. Appearance of gas shadow in heart, that is fetal heart, and great vessels of the fetus. This is called as Roberts sign, which is seen 12 hours after the intrauterine fetal death. So I repeat, the signs which are seen on X-ray abdomen. One is Spalding sign, which is overlapping of the cranial bones, which is seen 7 days after the intrauterine death. Then there is hyperflexion of the spine and hyperextension of the neck. There is crowding of the ribs. And last, which is the earliest sign, I would say, within 12 hours after the IUD, or intrauterine fetal death, IUFD, is Robert's sign, that is appearance of gas shadow in the heart and great vessels of the fetus. Now we would be investigating certain blood parameters which are important for us in diagnosing the cause of IUFD as well as managing this patient. So the investigations done are complete blood count, blood group and RH type, HbA1c, blood urea serum creatinine, TSH, lupus anticoagulant, anticardiolipin antibodies, VDRL and TORCH, and coagulation profile, which includes APTT, PT, and fibrinogen levels. I'll discuss one by one. First is CBC. Complete blood count, we want to know whether this patient is anemic or not, to find out the cause of anemia, a cause of IUFD, plus we want to induce this patient, we want to deliver this patient, so we want to make sure that she has good hemoglobin and her platelet count is normal. Then we must know her blood group and RH type. If it is negative and if her husband is positive, we can suspect probably it was RH isoimmunization which has led to this. Plus we need to know her blood group and RH type because we are going to keep the blood cross-matched and ready whenever we are trying to deliver this patient. HbA1c would give you her glucose control in last 90 days. So we will come to know whether she had uncontrolled diabetes or not. Blood urea or serum creatinine, if our patient has had hypertension. Thyroid stimulating hormone. Then lupus anticoagulant and anticardiolipin antibodies. These two investigations will tell us whether that is the cause of thrombophilia in this patient. Then VDRL and TORCH group of infections can lead to intrauterine death. And fibrinogen levels will start decreasing after intrauterine death. That takes few weeks for it to happen. But before the patient is induced, whether before the patient is delivered, we must check for the fibrinogen levels because there is high possibility that this patient may develop coagulation disorder. I repeat the investigations done on this: blood investigations, CBC, blood group and RH type, HbA1c, blood urea or serum creatinine, TSH, lupus anticoagulant, anticardiolipin antibodies, VDRL and TORCH group of infections, and blood coagulation profile by fibrinogen levels, APTT and PT. What are the complications of this intrauterine fetal death? Major complication is, first is a big psychological trauma. So patient can have psychological upset. She can go into psychosis. These patients are prone for infection. And I discussed coagulation disorder occurs because the fibrinogen levels go down. So coagulation disorder, which is due to defibrillation. And why does this defibrillation occur? It is a result of thromboplastin, which is released from the placenta and the decidia after intrauterine death. And after delivery, because prolactin levels come up, are already high, the progesterone, estrogen go down, the milk secretion may be established, and that lead to breast congestion. I repeat the complications: psychological upset, infection, coagulation disorder, breast congestion. Now you can take down. Complications of intrauterine fetal death. 1. Psychological upset. 2. Infection. 3. Coagulation disorder. Which occurs because of the decrease in the fibrinogen levels. and fibrinogen level decrease because there is thromboplastin coming from placenta and deciduum. And last is breast congestion. How do we prevent this intrauterine fetal death? One is regular antenatal care. Second, we must screen the at-risk mothers. Our first job is to segregate the low-risk and high-risk patients from history, from examination, and from investigations. And those who are high risk, more frequent antepartum fetal surveillance is done. And of course, correction of the underlying disease. Antihypertensives for hypertension, antidiabetics for diabetes, and control of infections like that. So I repeat, intrauterine death can be prevented by, you can take down, 1, regular antenatal care. Second, screen high-risk mothers. Third, more frequent antepartum fetal surveillance in high-risk mothers. More frequent antepartum fetal surveillance in high-risk mothers. And correction of underlying disease. How do we manage? Now the intrauterine fetal death has occurred. What do we do? Usually these patients go into spontaneous labor within 2 weeks of the incidence. In these 2 weeks, we must monitor the fibrinogen levels. But remember, once the patient and the relatives are told that this is an intrauterine fetal death, there is tremendous psychological upset. And they will not be ready to wait for 2 weeks for the spontaneous event to occur. So what choice do we have? We have to induce the labor. And once the labor has been done, completed, after delivery, to find out the exact cause of this intrauterine fetal death so that the measures can be taken to prevent these incidents from occurring in next pregnancy, we can advise fetal autopsy, fetal MRI, and placental biopsy. Fetal autopsy can give us some surprising findings like congenital heart disease, which were not picked up on ultrasound earlier. Or there are some anomalies which cannot be seen on ultrasound. And fetal, if ideally, is to subject the fetal for autopsy. But because of social reasons, because of psychological reasons, because of religious reasons, patient and relatives may not permit you to do so. In that case, at least request them whether you can do MRI of the fetus. And that can also give a lot of information about different structures in the fetus. And placental biopsy, that can give you the diagnosis of thrombophilias. The pathologist reports, yes, there were thrombin seen there at the placental bed. And so next pregnancy, you can add aspirin and heparin to prevent that. Now, how do we induce labor? Induction of labor usually is done by either dinoproston gel or injection oxytocin diluted in normal saline or ringer lactate and given IV. What should be our choice? If cervix is favorable, I mean if patient has good Bishop score. What is good Bishop score? Good Bishop score is cervix is mid-post and cervix is soft, cervix is dilated. That's a good Bishop score. If good Bishop score is there, means patient is inducible easily, So we can start oxytocin and induce the uterine contractions with the hope that the cervix will dilate and patient would deliver. But if cervix is unfavorable, that is poor Bishop score. What is poor Bishop score? Poor Bishop score is cervix is firm, long, and posterior post. So if cervix is unfavorable, oxytocin alone may not be sufficient to bring about delivery. In that case, we have to ripen the cervix. We have to improve the Bishop score. We have to make the cervix soft and dilatable. And that is done by insertion of PGE2 gel into the cervical canal that helps break the cellular matrix. So PGE2 gel is used for ripening the cervix. And once the cervix is ripe, once the Bishop score has improved, we can start oxytocin and achieve the induction of labor. Remember, artificial rupture of membranes is contraindicated in patients with intrauterine fetal death. Why so? For augmentation of labor, in early labor, we can start oxytocin and do artificial rupture of membranes. With artificial rupture of membrane, the fetal head descends down, presses on the cervix, induces what is called as Ferguson's reflex, which will induce uterine contractions, and improvement of the uterine contractions takes place. But here in IVFD, these patients are prone for infection. And you all know amniotic fluid is a very good culture medium. So doing rupture of membranes can introduce infection, that is one. Second, patients with IUD are prone for infections. Third, in intrauterine death, the fetal parts are collapsed. There is overlapping of the bones of the fetal head because they are flat bones, which we call as Spalding sign. So a collapsed head cannot exert pressure on the cervix and initiate Ferguson reflex. So artificial rupture of membranes will not help us in improving the uterine contractions and progress of the labor. In fact, it would cause the problem of infection. And that's why artificial rupture of membranes is contraindicated. How do you take care of the patient postnatally? Once the baby has delivered, the placenta is out, there is no postpartum hemorrhage. Now we have to take care of the mother's psychological status. But in initial few days, we have to use the antipsychotics to take care of her psyche. And second, these patients are prone for infection, and that's why perineal hygiene is to be kept. After every act of defecation, patient should be clean, the perineum should be cleaned with soap water, and daily the nursing staff has to give at least twice the perineal wash. So they clean the perineum, they clean the vagina, they clean the buttocks, and that helps prevent the ascent of infection. So perineal hygiene is very important. Next, these patients after delivery will have breast congestion, and to relieve that breast congestion, we have to reduce her prolactin levels so that the milk secretion will be suppressed. And suppression of prolactin levels is done by giving cabergoline tablets. Cabergoline comes as 0.25 or 0.5 milligram. Post-delivery, we should use 2 grams of cabergoline. So 2 tablets of cabergoline in the morning and 2 tablets of cabergoline in the evening. Such 4 tablets, they rapidly decrease the prolactin levels and the breast congestion can be prevented, and if it has occurred, can be treated. And then if the breast congestion has occurred, these cabbage leaves can also reduce the breast congestion. This lady is smiling because her congestion is getting reduced by application of these cabbage leaves. These cabbage leaves prior day or overnight are to be kept in the refrigerator, and these cold leaves when applied to the breast for more than half an hour are found to reduce the breast congestion rapidly. So I just repeat, care of the mother after delivery. You can take down control of infection. How do you do that? Antibiotics and frequent perineal wash. control of infection by antibiotics, and frequent perineal wash. Next is lactation suppression. Lactation suppression is done by 1. Tight breast support. Tight breast support. 2nd, tablet cabergoline, 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 0.5 milligram, 2 tablets in the morning and 2 tablets in the evening. Such 4 tablets, that is 2 milligram of cabergoline. Then if breast congestion persists, cold cabbage leaf application. And of course, the psychological support. And don't forget to advise her that during next pregnancy, her early antenatal registration is mandatory so that we can start taking the precautions right from her first trimester. With this, I finish my talk on intrauterine fetal death and wish you good luck to attempt the 10 MCQ questions which will follow this talk. Thank you. Thank you all.